Continue from the previous file, Literary Types Tragedy, page 33. Thus, tragic irony is more than a mere trick of speech and is embedded in the plot. Man thinks that he is free and makes a right choice in his actions, but he acts in ignorance, and not only his speeches but his deeds are double-edged. Tragic irony also implies a contrast between the ignorance of the characters and knowledge of the spectators. Agamemnon treads along the purple carpet and gives victory to Clytemnestra, but is ignorant of the victory that his wife has wrangled from him. His ignorance is very different from that of Oedipus, who did everything to avoid his doom. Euripides' tragedy gives a new turn to tragic irony. In his Electra, Orestes does the horrible deed, but his doubts at the beginning and repentance at the end carry their own ironical commentary on Apollo's directive. Euripides' irony is best seen in his treatment of stories where the protagonists are avowedly guilty, Medea and Phaedra, for he represents them as both sinful and noble. Tragic irony or Sophoclean irony gives the tragedy objectivity. This objectivity is also achieved by Shakespeare. He allows his characters complete independence of thought and movement, but every step they find that their hopes were lies and their knowledge was ignorance. King Lear's movements is from ignorance caused by his egoism to knowledge attained through sympathy with fellow beings and lower creatures. Othello's tragedy may be described as a journey from ignorance about himself, his wife, and Iago to a complete knowledge which brings about his ruin, but also gives him illumination. Irony pervades Macbeth, in which every act is followed by a consequence that is the opposite of what was intended or expected. Macbeth murders Duncan in order to get the throne and happiness. He gets the throne, but he envies Duncan, who sleeps in peace. Macbeth's nobility is emphasized, and Duncan's trust in him is repeatedly mentioned. The rest of the play is a cruel commentary on both. Thus, does Shakespeare accentuate the dramatic irony of a whole situation? Irony in Greek tragedy is associated with the idea of fate or the will of the gods. The chief character of the play, proud and willful, offends the gods by some excess in character, and from the beginning of the play he is headed for a doom to which he remains blind to the very end. Irony implies a contrast between appearance and reality. It is, as Moulton says, quote, a sort of double dealing in destiny itself, unquote. The operation of destiny, as exhibited in the plot of Macbeth, is throughout tinctured with irony. The element of mockery, page 34, appearing always in this and that apparent tricks to destiny, turns out to be the very means destiny chooses by which to fulfill itself. The wide breach between what things seem to be and what they really are for Macbeth is the work of mocking fate. Irony of fate is the common expression for this kind of turn of events in the life of a man. In Sophocles and Shakespearean tragedies, words are often charged with double meaning. In bracket, one of the characters and one for the audience. Bracket closed. The speaker unconsciously predicts the future. There is deep irony when Duncan invites himself to Macbeth's castle. Both Duncan and Banquo are attracted by the calm beauty of the castle. They do not know that death lurks there. The contrast between appearance and reality makes the situation grim and terrible. The drunken potter calls himself keeper of Hell Gate, and the play is an ironical commentary on the potter's unconscious description of himself. The beauty of this tragic irony lies in its reminiscent pathos. It haunts the audience with retrospective pathos. It creates a pervasive atmosphere of omens and portents and keeps the mind of the audience constantly in a state of awed curiosity and suspense. Next topic, comedy. Question 15. Write a note on some of the comic devices in romantic comedy. Answer. Romantic comedy is essentially different from classical comedy. The main interest of classical comedy is the exposure of offender against common practice and against unquestioned propriety in the established fitness of things. The purpose of classical comedy is to correct manners and morals, and its weapon is ridicule. Romantic comedy as practiced by Shakespeare, Lyly, Greene is a more venturesome and a more imaginative undertaking. Shakespearean comedy is not finally satiric, it is poetic. It is an artist's vision and not a critic's exposition. Love is the principal theme of Shakespeare's comedies, but true love alone cannot make a comedy. Comedy must amuse. Gordon comments, quote, "Comedy is a plump figure and holds its sides. Love is lean and hold a hand upon its heart." Unquote. Romantic comedy makes a compromise between romance and comedy. The seriousness of love is relieved by the generosity of laughter and the irresponsibility of laughter by the seriousness of love. However, certain comic devices are adapted to make romantic comedy entertaining. The main purpose of comedy is laughter. And page 35. This is achieved by such devices as disguise, deception, tricks to dupe the characters, the juxtaposition of the high and the low. Shakespeare makes love-making highly entertaining by the use of disguise. Shakespeare employs a mechanical trick for the purpose of romance and comedy. In As You Like It, the wooing of Orlando in disguise is highly entertaining as comedy. In Twelfth Night, Viola takes the disguise of a boy and offers silent and sincere love to Orsino. In Lyly's Endymion, woman's dress of a young man befools the duke who falls in love with him, while the queen sees through the disguise and is stricken with passion. Thus the disguise causes the deception and creates complications. In Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer, the heroine takes the disguise of the barmaid and the poor relation of the family and thus tests the character of the hero and persuades him to offer his sincere love to her. In Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, irrationalities of love are exposed in a humorous manner. Humor is the main device in a romantic comedy, and critical or statistical exposition of defects or eccentricities are ruled out. Portia in the male dress of a lawyer, arguing for Antonio in the presence of her husband Bassanio, provides comic mirth. Duping of a character is another device. In Much Ado About Nothing, Malvolio is duped into believing that the mistress of the house is in love with him, and he is led to many ludicrous behaviors. This is pure fun. Tony in She Stoops to Conquer befools his mother into believing that she is going forward 40 miles away, but actually she moves around the house in the darkness of the night. This creates pure comic fun. Romantic comedy is a blend of romance and satire. Satirical elements are provided by some characters who either expose their own angularities or expose the eccentricities of other characters and the time. Touchstone in As You Like It, Feste in Twelfth Night serve the purpose of comic chorus in commenting on the follies and foibles of life and manners. Orlando in As You Like It and Olivia in Twelfth Night expose themselves to ridicule by their follies of love. Jacques in As You Like It makes himself ridiculous by his cynical utterances. Mrs. Hardcastle in She Stoops to Conquer is a satirical portrait of a fashionable old woman who wants to pass as a beautiful woman, and Hastings makes much fun of her follies. Mrs. Malaprop's boastfulness about her learning is another satirical portrait. Thus, romantic comedy makes a blend of romance and satire, seriousness and fun. Page 36. Romantic comedies introduce fools or clowns or buffoons to provide comic mirth. They are the direct descendants of the vice of the moralities. They are dressed in motley costumes which excite laughter. There are fools like Dogberry and Burgess in Much Ado About Nothing, and Sir Toby Belch and Sir Andrew Aguecheek in Twelfth Night provide comic mirth by their buffoonery. Touchstone is professional fool, but he speaks the soundest sense under the guise of buffoonery. Laughter in romantic comedy is thoughtful laughter. Crude laughter is combined with intellectual laughter. The boasting and pedantry of Sir Tophas in Endymion produce laughter. The realistic elements are often combined with romantic elements in romantic comedy. The romantic love of Cynthia and Endymion is contrasted with the realistic physical passion of Cocytus and Tellus. The love of Orlando and Rosalind is contrasted with the realistic comical love of Touchstone and Audrey, the sentimental love of Phoebe, Sylvius. These contrasts provide the comic humor. Indeed, in romantic comedy, humor, wit and fun are commingled with the love theme. Serious love is shown in a spirit of humor and fun. This is true as much in Shakespeare's romantic comedies as in Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer or in Sheridan's The Rivals, which successfully harmonize the romantic comedy and the comedy of manners. Question 16. Incongruity is the very soul of comedy. Discuss. Answer. There are various theories of comedy. Aristotle suggests that comedy holds up to ridicule ignoble actions of ignoble people. The ridiculous is defined, quote, as a mistake or deformity not productive of pain or harm to others, unquote. Aristotle speaks of exaggerated traits in human character, boastfulness, buffoonery, even of deficiency, as in the boor. These traits were exploited by the comic writers. Thus, Aristotle suggests that mistakes or incongruities are subjects for comedy. Comedy excites laughter by exposing the offenders against decorum and norm to ridicule. Thus, incongruity in the characters or in the society is the source of comic laughter. The theory of superiority developed by Hobbes, Bergson, Meredith and others emphasize our delight in seeing ourselves less unfortunate than some others. We see in others incongruity from which we are free. The theory of contrast emphasizes our delight in any form of incongruity, any difference between our ideas of things and things themselves. Page 37. We are delighted to see persons acting stupidly, oddly, or recklessly with relative impunity. Incongruity depends on the contrast between what the characters are and what they pretend to or believe. Mrs. Malaprop thinks that she is a learned woman and utters big words, hardly knowing that the words are misused. Mr. Micawber is an incorrigible optimist and believes that something will turn up. But he is congenitally incompetent person. Henry Bergson, in his essay Laughter, propounds a theory of the comic which takes inelasticity of mind or body as the starting point of the laughter. A comic character, according to this theory, behaves like an automaton. Micawber goes his own way, simply unaware of his absurdity in the eye of others. Falstaff is a coward, libertine, liar, but he lives in his own world, quite indifferent to what others think of him. He is not aware of his incongruity, but the audience are. This contrast produces the comic laughter. Kant traces comic laughter to a, quote, strained expectation being suddenly reduced to nothing, unquote. Bergson contests that the starting point of comedy, quote, is something encrusted upon the living, unquote. Whatever may be the various theories, it is suggested that comic laughter results from incongruity. We laugh when established modes and patterns are altered, and someone behaves like a god, animal, or inanimate object. Ben Jonson sees comedy in the exaggeration of a particular humor. There is incongruity when the balance of humor is upset and a character is either jealous or angry or phlegmatic or melancholy. The mental incongruity is the source of comedy. An old woman trying to be fashionable and displaying her beauty is comical. We laugh at the ridiculous dresses of Malvolio and his pontifical attitude as if he has become the master of the house. Physical deformity is also exhibited as comical. Falstaff is bulky. Old Gobbo is blind. Laurel is thin while Hardy is fat. We may laugh at a comic character in detachment or scorn, or we may feel somehow allied with him and laugh with him, recognizing common human feelings. A fusion of sympathy and laughter is possibly the most pervasive kind of comedy, in which there is a union between the mocker and the mocked, and in which art holds the mirror, however exaggerated, up to our natures. Question 17. What is the source of laughter in comedy and what function does it serve? Answer: same as the answer to question 15. Page 38. Question 18. The comedy of humors and the comedy of manners are representatives of the ages to which they belong, but in essence they convey the same comic spirit. Discuss. Answer. The comedy of humors was an outgrowth of the Renaissance stress on decorum in life, which required a well-balanced personality unmarked by any grave eccentricities. The concept of humors was derived from a traditional theory of physiology in which the state of health and by extension the state of mind, of character, depended on a balance among the four elemental fluids: black and yellow bile, blood and phlegm. Though perhaps first applied to drama by Chapman, the notion was seized and fully developed into a theory of comedy by Ben Jonson, whose bent towards a satirical drama is clearly shown in his first play, Every Man in His Humour, in bracket 1598 bracket closed. Ben Jonson revolted against the crudities of Elizabethan romantic drama. He was a classicist, a moralist, and a reformer of the drama. He turned his back upon romance and presented the London of his own day with strenuous effort towards realism and an attempt to confine the action of the drama within the unities of time, place, and theme. His characters conform to a theory based on the ancient concept of humours. The method was partly Latin and partly medieval. For the characters of Latin comedy, as those of Plautus and Terence, were static type, like the jealous husband, the stern father, the cunning servant, and the obsequious parasite, and those of the English moralities were allegorical figures, both types bearing a resemblance to Jonson's creations. Jonson adapted this conception of character to suit his dramatic purpose and reinforced it by the ancient physiological theory of humours. It was believed that the human body was composed of 4 basic humours or fluids which determine the character of the individual. Preponderance of any particular humour in the system throws the character off the balance and makes a man humorous. Thus, a man having too much of choler becomes a choleric in temperament. Thus, humours provide Jonson with the tools of his satire. The very title of Jonson's first play, Every Man in His Humour, shows Jonson's aim in characterization. He selects one of the humours in a character, and by exaggerating these eccentricities, he produces the comic effect. Thus, like Terence, he deals with a type, not with a personality. Jonson's best comic characters are thus specimens of humours. Keightley, whose entire nature is warped by jealousy, and who, page 39, acts accordingly, is a real humour. Old Novel is guided by the humour of overzealous solicitude for his son. Bobadil is the braggart soldier. Jonson concentrates his most fiery and effective satire on these humorous characters. He ridicules the vices of men, puts folly in a foolish shape before the audience, and so makes the audience laugh in good humour. The follies of a braggart, of a tyrannical father, of a jealous husband, all are put before us, and thus the prevailing eccentricities of the age are mocked out of court. Jonson's characters are, however, two-dimensional. They are static. Jonson's first aim is satire, and for this humour affords an admirable weapon. The inner reality of characters may be overlooked, but all that appears outwardly, the tricks and oddities of behaviour, is minutely observed and presented with a vivid force which drives the ridicule home. Jonson's humour comedy is closely related both to comedy of character, since he deals with peculiarity of character as a root of action, and to comedy of manners, since he goes to contemporary society for his norm. Though he had ardent followers in later generations, Shadwell, even Congreve, and Sheridan in the drama, Smollett and Dickens in the novel, this type of comedy is usually associated in literary history with Jonson and his times. Obviously, Jonson used the term humour in a far more restricted sense than we do today, when it can mean a great many things. The comedy of manners is a type of comedy which was successfully practiced in the Restoration period. This type of drama had risen when Ben Jonson, who made the presentation of humours the mode of satirical and sometimes ludicrous portraiture in his comedies. It was revived with extraordinary brilliance and cynical witticism by the dramatists of the Restoration. It is called the Comedy of Manners because it presented the superficial habits and manners of only a section of the society, the elegant aristocracy with their fashionable vices, intrigues, and outward glamour of polished behavior. The Comedy of Manners is almost wholly intellectual and aristocratic. The manners displayed were the affectations and cultured veneer of fine society. These manners were the social qualities acquired by the men from social intercourse. The Restoration Comedy of Manners mirrored the dilettante society of the day. It shows mainly men and women in their relationship, particularly as husband and wife or as lovers. Amorous intrigue played a very important part in the action of the drama. Verbal repartees constituted the predominant interest in the play. Continued in the next file.